All right, let's try not to think about the current horrors for a minute. Well, we'll get to them, but just to start, this is a weird question that we wrote before obviously all of this happened. What's your like favorite insane right-wing conspiracy theory, misinfo kind of thing? What's your favorite right-wing meltdown of the last decade or so?
God, I like the ones that sort of veer into what would be a plot in a Philip K. Dick novel. Like, I like the ones about how like every prominent politician has already been executed, and the people that you see on TV are their clones, and then sometimes the clones have to be arrested and executed, but then unfortunately they are replaced yet again by another clone. And as of late, I've really been enjoying the like expanding aperture of transvestigations to include every human being who's ever been born, but particularly celebrities. And I just think there's like sort of a Scanner Darkly situation going on here, where these people are going to end up transvestigating themselves and concluding that they were born a different gender than the one they currently present as or assume is their identity.
I actually saw a really good transvestigation post a couple weeks ago, which was so like Andrew Tate like did a video like in a Speedo, and his bulge wasn't prominent enough, and so a lot of his followers started transvestigating him and asking why his bulge wasn't bigger.
Well, it's the skull ratios never lie. There's a divine mathematics to this. And basically any prominent person, any person you see on TV, the movies, the news, etc., they are trans. And the scary thing here, though, is that true. If in your endeavors to expose this fraud or like this, demonic ritual occultism being perpetrated on the world, through your efforts to expose this, you yourself gain some notoriety, then I think like the veil must be torn away from your eyes as well. And you must realize that all human beings are trans.
Have you come across any sort of right-wing conspiracy theories about the climate, about weather machines, poisoning the air, chemtrails, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of chemtrail stuff. And then I think a more recent vintage, like a more recent variation on chemtrails is people who just say like the sky is wrong. And
I love those.
The sun didn't used to be this color, or
right.
Or clouds. When I was growing up, the clouds didn't look like that, and it's of a par with flat Earth conspiracy theories, which I don't really know if that can be neatly broken down into a right or left wing political point of view. I
don't think so either. Yeah.
It's like an all-encompassing mania that very basic facts about the physical universe are wrong. The Earth is flat. It's a disk. Antarctica is a giant ice wall. But kind of similar to the chemtrail things, what I like about these sort of, like I said, mega conspiracies that are not the CIA killed Kennedy. It's like the Earth that you think of. When you think of the Earth, you're thinking of the wrong shape.
Right.
It's what I like about them is let's say it could be conclusively proven tomorrow that the world is flat. Take me to the ice wall. Let me, throw a penguin off the edge of the planet.
I want to see where the giants live. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The Earth is flat now. Now what? Who cares? It would not affect my daily. I mean, because life here on the discworld, whether it's a sphere or a disc, is going to proceed pretty much apace.
Yeah.
And similar to chemtrails, it's just sort of okay. The contrails that you see coming out of airplanes, they're actually spraying the world with mood-altering chemicals, which once again, if that's true, tight. I hope they're doing that. But too, it's what? Okay, I'm aware of it. I believe in it now. Well, how can I mediate the effects of the chemicals that the government's spraying on me? What can be done?
Gotta get rid of planes.
And
just gotta get rid of them.
Well, okay, get rid of planes. I hate airports.
The reason I ask is because we here at Panic World HQ have been wondering how the right's response to climate disasters has changed. There are events where it's glaringly obvious, we need the government and that we should be mad that they failed us, and they're trying to convince us to stop expecting them to do anything. Today we're going to be talking about the rise of right-wing conspiracy theories about the weather and about the climate and the flatness of the earth. I'm Ryan Broderick. This is Panic World, a show about how the internet warps our minds, our culture, and eventually reality. Sometimes you'll be hearing from our resident flat earther producer, Grant Irving. He'll pop up from time to time. And our guest this week is from a little show called Chapo Trap House. Will, welcome to the show.
Hello.
I wanted to say my favorite kind of flat earth adjacent conspiracy theory is the idea that mountains are the trunks of giant trees and that trees are grass and that everything used to be bigger.
I mean, you see that one about that, like the mesa that's in Wyoming that was featured in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, can't lie, kind of looks like a giant tree trunk. But once again, like, if you believe in this, what do you want me to do with it? I'll just go, okay, mountains are trees, trees are grass, everything used to be bigger. But like, in the reality, and like in the world that I've lived every second of my conscious life in, the proportions of things, trees, dogs, animals, human beings, seem to be pretty much uniform. Consistent. You know, like it doesn't bother me one way or another.
So before we go deeper into our timeline of sort of how these things have spread, how they've taken root, so to speak, I wanted to ask, like, have you personally, you know, how have you felt the impacts of climate change? You know, have you gone through extreme weather? What has that been like? What is your relationship to the ever-changing weather patterns of the Earth right now?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this before coming on the show, and it's just like, it's sort of one of the, I think the difficult things about climate change, I think that people have, is that it's just so massive, like, because it's the planet, it's everything.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's either imperceptible or it's too great to like even conceive of, or that like, why bother recycling, right? Like, it's just
right. But
then I was thinking about like, well, what can I see or experience of it in my lifetime? You know, this isn't a catastrophe, but like it disturbs me that like I've lived in New York City my entire life, and we used to have very serious winters in New York City, and
sure did.
We just don't anymore. Like, not like in recent memory. We could get a couple feet of snow, but then like the next week it's 50 degrees and it all melts. And I remember growing up when I was a kid, there was snow pretty much frozen on the sidewalk from like December to April until it all melted in the spring. Like, there'd be huge mounds of like disgusting gray snow, you know, mountains piled up at every cut and street corner. So at one time you don't really notice it, but then if you think about it, it's quite upsetting and frightening to think about.
100%. I grew up in New England, and I have distinct memories of being able to jump off my porch into the snow as a kid, like safely. You know, it was that big. And my mom's a flight attendant, and she mentioned this, and I kind of thought it was bullshit, and I looked it up. She says
your
that
mom is a flight attendant, so she's in on the flat Earth conspiracy.
She does the chemtrails. She does the chemtrails. She has she does the hose. She plugs it in.
But also the flat Earth, because you look out the window of a plane, and I don't see a sphere. I don't see a curve.
She's seen it. She's seen the edge. Yeah. But she has talked about how the air feels different. She's been flying for 50 years plus, and she talks about how there's more turbulence. Everything feels different. And I did look it up, and it is changing the way like air travel works. But I feel like Hurricane Sandy was the big one for me, where the first sort of extreme weather moment of my life. And then most recently, the wildfires turning all of New York City just unbreathable orange for several days. That really freaked me out.
I remember that, and I posted a photo of what like it looked like outside my living room window, and it was like, the sky was just orange. It looked totally apocalyptic. But to me, I was like, this is kind of cool. Time to put this on the gram. And my cousin, who lives out west, pointed out that I had all my windows open. So. I'm unprepared for these kind of things, and I was gonna say Hurricane Sandy was the other big one, because 9/11 didn't even shut down New York City, and Hurricane Sandy did. Like, a whole week the subways were just closed, and like that's something that was inconceivable to me for my entire life prior to that hurricane.
I was living in Astoria at the time, and I went to like Astoria Park and watched Manhattan just go dark block by block. You know, that night it came in, and I remember just going, this is like something out of a movie. I've never seen anything like it since. And then you know all the photos of Lower Manhattan just like washing away. And as you said, this is a massive topic. It's a massive thing to wrap your head around if you're in one of these events, even if you're just watching on the news. And so trying to figure out, you know, how we track the right wing reaction to it, we wanted to start with the founding of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, in 1979, and they've regularly faced criticisms for how they respond to natural disasters. So we start our story in 1989. Hurricane Hugo devastates the Southeast and the Caribbean. South Carolina Senator Fritz Hollings calls FEMA the sorriest bunch of bureaucratic jackasses I've ever worked with, criticizing their slow response. So we had a shockingly fair thing to be upset about, wanting emergency response to run really well. And it's criticized by both parties. It was the main talking point about FEMA in the 90s when Hurricane Andrew destroys Miami and much of the Gulf Coast.
I remember like natural disasters used to be sort of a nonpartisan thing, or at least that's how I remembered it. Like FEMA really like didn't enter my consciousness until Hurricane Katrina, where it became like, you know, a real national disgrace and a debacle. Sure. And was, you know, politicized because like it was, you know, made the Bush administration look terrible. I will say though, my only conscious thought or memory I have about FEMA from the 90s was that FEMA was a crucial part of the X-Files movie, the rather disappointing X-Files movie, Fight the Future. Yes. The Martin Landau character is like, Mulder, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And essentially in the movie, FEMA will be the government agency that will carry out the alien colonization of our planet.
President will declare a state of emergency, at which time all government, all federal agencies will come under the power of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, the secret government.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that is kind of what our researcher Adam discovered as well. He has I'm going to read what he wrote here. Conspiracy theories are probably pretty widespread, but absolutely nowhere in any serious mainstream news source I can find from the time. To track down anything, I have to go into archive text of books published by wackos like HAARP, The Ultimate Weapon of Conspiracy, which was published in 1998. And it reads, several researchers have commented that the United Nations would not have bothered to create a law against environmental modification unless someone actually had the technology to do it. Can the military and/or their scientists call up an earthquake on demand? In a moment, I will show that there is a growing body of evidence that they can, and that HAARP may be part of this technology. Have you ever heard the acronym HARP?
Certainly, but like only within the last 5 or 10 years.
Can you define it for our audience here?
It's the government weather machine.
Yes.
It's the machine that the government, it's in Alaska, I believe, and it's what the government does to control the weather.
Right. It stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. It was a Navy project in the mid-90s to improve transmission signals by using a layer of the atmosphere itself as the transmitter. It's pretty nifty. And it immediately becomes a fixation for conspiracy theorists. But you know, it was X-Files stuff. It was silly. In 2009, Jesse Ventura visits HARP as part of the TV show Conspiracy Theories with Jesse Ventura.
Why don't you let me in? I have the documents right here.
Let him see the weather machine.
God bless Jesse.
Yeah, that is. It's kind of amazing that that's just like all of how our politics works now. Conspiracy theories with whoever you want it to be.
Another X-Files connection. Jesse Ventura.
That's right. I mean, in a lot of ways, like I did an X-Files rewatch a couple years ago, and it started to get kind of uncomfortable by like how much it sort of predicted just like the way people talk about everything now. But as these things start to get uploaded onto the internet, people start sharing them, and that takes us to what you brought up, Hurricane Katrina. So like, what are your memories of the media and the political class reaction to Hurricane Katrina?
I mean, I remember watching it on cable news from here in New York and being, you know, like much of the rest of the country, you know, horrified at just seeing a major American city just sink for an entire week and the people left behind in it to be essentially abandoned by their own government, or like for like a week while thousands died. What I will say, what I think is like the most salient fact about Katrina from my perspective of like remembering the like recent history of this country, is that it was early in George W. Bush's second term. It was the event that ended his presidency. And like I don't mean that like in a
right.
literal sense, because he served out his full term, but like it forever severed the connection in Americans' head between George W. Bush as sort of like the commander-in-chief, the leader, the guy who's going to protect us from bad guys. And it's like, people forget, like, the 2004 election was a really close election, and they probably stole it. But, like, Americans had already soured on the war in Iraq. And, like, George W. Bush, whatever you want to believe, like, won that election pretty narrowly. I remember Katrina mostly for its like political ramifications, as that it like really permanently undermined George W. Bush and his administration's credibility as competent stewards of American national security.
I think that's right. So on this show, we come back to sort of 9/11 often as the beginning of a lot of the paranoia and the conspiratorial mindset of America starting. And I think when you talk about climate change, Hurricane Katrina is that for this world. And I remember even in the 2000s, I'm not sure young people really understand how much of a cultural punching bag Al Gore was for talking about climate change. I mean, I think there's a couple South Park episodes about it. The very idea that you could blame something like Hurricane Katrina on climate change was ridiculous, and yet the Republicans who were in power had really no ability to manage extreme weather, no ability to manage natural disasters like it. It is the moment where a lot of antennas go up among, especially like the fringe, the political fringes about this stuff.
Well, yeah, because like this idea that like outside threats, if they're fomented by human beings, that is sort of like, I don't know, rational, or you can put that in a context you can wrap your arms around.
You can wrap your head around it. Yeah, exactly.
But like to see a destruction wrought by weather, by natural disasters on such a scale, particularly of an entire city that is just essentially like a bowl sitting there, when those levees break, it just fills with water, and like it's horrifying, and I think it blinkers more of people's ability to like conceive of a threat like that, and also just like makes people question or begin to like demand like, well, why aren't we protected from that threat?
100%.
And like there are certainly a lot of things that could be done to protect a city like New Orleans or New York City, for instance, from like rising sea levels or a storm surge like that. It would cost trillions of dollars, but like I think that's the point. It's like any mitigation of what the effects of climate change are likely to be would require such a massive state capacity and state intervention that people just give up. And like they don't want to care about it, and any damage caused by it is just sort of like, oh, well, that's the weather. It happens.
So I'm glad you brought this up, because I want to throw this theory by you, which is that like in a lot of my experience, when you're talking about conspiracy theories, you're talking about kind of like mis and disinfo, on the right in particular. I tend to categorize it in two ways. One is like genuine people, like real people who are trying to make sense of something that they cannot make sense of. And then bad actors who are trying to find someone to blame for this problem that we don't want to deal with politically. When you look at a lot of the earlier kind of internet chatter about something like Hurricane Katrina, it is a lot of people running cover for a Republican Party that did not want to invest the money to protect a city like New Orleans. That's what I would sort of argue. But
also that like if when you get into conspiracies about like the government control of the weather, and like I think you're seeing that more and more now when floods happen or hurricanes. Like I don't think it's widespread, but like that narrative is out there, and I think it's just a way of like conceiving of a threat of that magnitude, or like destruction wrought on that level that is so catastrophic, or like people losing everything, or like you think about like the state of Florida. In sometime soon, insurance companies are just going to stop insuring construction. They're going to stop giving homeowners insurance for floods and things like that in Florida. And what's going to happen to the state of Florida then? What's going to happen to the real estate market? Well, I mean, politicians in Florida are already asking the federal government to just essentially bail out all private insurance in the state of Florida for homes and buildings.
Right.
Because like the thing is, like the government is doing it to you in so much as that they like are not doing anything to mitigate the effects of climate change and have been like bought out by the petroleum industry. And I'm not the first one to make this observation, but like yes, there is a machine that controls the weather and is trying to kill you. It's called the car. It's called the internal combustion engine. And that's what I mean is like to assign blame, like who is the culprit for it? I mean, like even for me to say, like, it's easy to just say it's the government and oil companies' fault, but really what it is like the collective responsibility of post-industrial human civilization and anyone living and taking part in it, which is quite a lot of people.
It's a lot. Yeah.
So like if it's a weather machine, well then it's just like, well yeah, someone is at fault for it. You can blame someone. They're doing it to you, rather than like it's something that we as a species, to varying degrees of responsibility, certainly, are doing collectively to ourselves and our ability to, I don't know, maintain human civilization or anything like a dignified life in large areas of the country, of the planet.
Before we move on from Katrina, I want to run through some of the details of what happened, just so we have it here. So, per the New York Times, at writing at the time, the 17th Street levee that gave way and led to the flooding of New Orleans was part of an intricate aging system of barriers and pumps that was so chronically underfinanced that senior regional officials of the Army Corps of Engineers complained about it publicly for years. And then as as we start to understand how the government responded and sort of the racism baked into how the government responded, the Huffington Post wrote at the time, this I thought was really interesting. Yahoo.com's page provided one of the most blatant examples of the racial bias. The website featured a photo of two white residents wading through the water with food. The caption read, "Two residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store after Hurricane Katrina came through the area." Then there is a photo of a black youth wading through water with food. The caption reads, "A young man walks through chest-deep floodwater after looting a grocery store." And then we see that get even worse as FEMA comes into the city, starts putting people into the stadium. And that's where we get a moment that we've talked about on the show before, which is when Kanye West tells all of America that George Bush doesn't care about black people.
I remember seeing that live on TV too, man. That was like
it was
the moon landing.
It was amazing.
It bought Kanye so many years of goodwill from so many of us. He he could have gone so far, and he still managed to go too far to voice it.
I mean, my favorite part about that moment was Mike Myers standing next to him, and like his look when he said it was like, what?
Yeah, it's like one of the greatest faces ever made on television.
Yeah.
But we're going to throw to a break, and after the break, we're going to be talking about how a little show called InfoWars gets in on the mix. But first, a word from our sponsors, InfoWars. Okay, so I did not realize this until we started doing research for this show. Paul Joseph Watson was not the first Prison Planet guy. Yeah, it was an established like offshoot of the InfoWars network before Paul Joseph Watson took it over, which I didn't realize.
Wow, so the Prison Planet is sort of like the Dalai Lama. It's just sort of like
yeah,
you have to be reincarnated
exactly
as Prison Planet.
So at the time, InfoWars' Prison Planet, they publish a post that reads, "In this exclusive interview for Prison Planet TV subscribers, Ben Livingston explains how for decades the U.S. government has had the power to both lessen and increase the severity of adverse weather for their own purposes." And then there's an article from the time entitled "Connecting the Dots, Katrina, Another Deliberate 9/11." And this is interesting. It reads, "Was New Orleans's Hurricane Katrina disaster another deliberately created spike event in the same vein as the Oklahoma City bombing and New York City's 9/11? Eyewitness accounts from at least 25 people who are fearful for their lives because they are talking saw people blowing up the New Orleans levees after the main storm had subsided. These levees in question were extremely strong, and that would take something akin to an atomic bomb to destroy them. In addition, how do we explain water temperatures being substantially hotter than they should have been? Was the water cooked by an EMF, microwave radiation, pulse technology, or some other energy source to redirect the hurricane?" So InfoWars was growing, but this was still extremely fringe. Though some local news and a Spike Lee doc did cover the bomb theory, so we can flag this slowly inching more into the mainstream.
This stuff lands to it, like to people, and like even to a certain extent lands in my own psyche, like in my own heart, because like I don't know if the levees were intentionally blown up or not. My suspicion is that, like, you know, if I had to like guess, I think is that they probably weren't. But like so many things in American life, I guess beginning with 9/11 in my lifetime, but you could go back further than that. Are these like, I was talking about on the show the other day, like in the context of the Charlie Kirk assassination, but like you could take any one of a dozen examples of these like terrifying sort of meta events in American life that are like sort of blinker your imagination and like are never conclusively resolved in any way, nor is anyone really ever held accountable. The obvious questions that I think a lot of people have about these events are just left out there to linger. And whether they are, you know, reasonable questions or suspicions or not, the fact of the matter is, like, they're there. So it makes it hard to, like, conclusively make any strong definitive statement because, like I said, like, I should be clear here. I don't think the levees that sunk New Orleans were blown up. But, like, would I put it past our government or the people in charge of it to, like, destroy an American city for some nefarious purpose? I don't know. So you tell me.
It's funny you bring this up because, like, I mean, I've said this before. I sort of always adhere to the idea that stupidity and negligence are the true conspiracy. Like, I just don't think you can get enough people to stay quiet, to do some sort of mass action like 9/11 ahead of time. That said, my thinking has become a lot more conspiratorial since Trump took office the second time. Specifically with the Charlie Kirk stuff, where like I was like real far down some rabbit holes where I'm like, these guys are making some sense. And like, I get the impulse, especially because there are so many examples of this, as you said, throughout American history, especially modern American history, where, we never get a conclusive answer for anything or one that satisfies everybody.
I try to remain skeptical of my own urge and instinct to indulge that part of myself because it is so satisfying to do and it's so easy to do and it's kind of thrilling to do. But I think it goes back to like this idea about the pleasure of conspiracies is that they provide, true or not, they provide essentially what at the end of the day a reassuring narrative. It sort of protects us, protects your own psyche and your own identity from the idea that like nobody is really in charge of anything,
which is terrifying,
and that life and human history is just like a series of increasingly interconnected and cascading violent catastrophes and disasters, of which no one can really conclusively said to be the author of or like could have been prevented had someone done something differently.
Yeah, I'd much rather I like to take like maybe an hour every week, every month, and just totally indulge in conspiratorial thinking and then just sort of turn it off. I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go see what all the whack jobs say. And then I'll just like chill out. I feel like I as a treat.
I think that's a good way to do it. But like these baffling and terrifying events that like sort of keep happening and people like feel like that we should be protected from. We should be protected from things like, I don't know, like Stephen Paddock shooting 600 people from a hotel room in Las Vegas for seemingly no reason.
Which we've never heard anything about ever again.
Yeah, what happened with it? Like, why did he do that? Like, what's going on?
Well, and I think the internet has maybe not made this worse, but at least changed the nature of it. And so I want to move to the next disaster in our timeline here, because I think this is the first one that is truly shaped by the internet and understood via the internet. And we mentioned at the top of the show, Hurricane Sandy. It is an interesting example compared to Hurricane Katrina, because for the most part, it's managed by the government decently well. In fact, the FEMA director at the time, who was hired by Bush, criticizes Obama for being too on top of it, which is very funny. And it's a moment where stuff like InfoWars breaks containment, because now everyone's online. So InfoWars is publishing all kinds of stuff about HAARP, claiming that Obama is controlling the weather.
Obama, I was not familiar with your game.
Yeah,
but
good.
I simply must respect. Yeah, I remember like Sandy being like a moment of collective cooperation and solidarity among New Yorkers. And I never remembered anyone being furious at the government, state, city, or federal. Many, many fewer people died during Hurricane Sandy than Hurricane Katrina. So like that's understandable. But I just remember being like, this is like a once in a century event. Like it's literally an impossible situation. I'm shocked that they got the subways up and running in like a week.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I remember being like pretty much content with how the government responded to Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah, and a lot of the right wing spin on this, they didn't have a lot of teeth. I mean, the Drudge Report speculated that the storm was going to be used to hide bad job reports.
Okay. That's great. Look, you said about like the only conspiracy being like incompetence. Like, imagine the work. They were like, Mr. President, the Q2 job numbers are slightly lower than expected or projected. And then they were like, boot up the HARP system. We're going to destroy Lower Manhattan.
Exactly.
Again.
Please do, though. I mean, there are a lot of.
We're going to flood the financial capital of the planet.
So that pretty much sums up normal responses to natural disasters and mainstream and conspiratorial responses. And now, unfortunately, it's time to jump to the Trump years. When Hurricane Maria hits Puerto Rico in 2017, the government response is completely incompetent. It's a disaster. And it's also now a Republican administration at this point. And Trump, he's bragging about the death toll.
I remember him throwing like paper towels, toilet paper.
Exactly. It becomes a total political quagmire. San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulian Cruz says, if anybody out here is listening, we are dying and you are killing us with the inefficiency. That's when Trump throws paper towels at storm victims and denies death toll numbers. And he'll just continue to deny that approximately 3,000 people died, thousands more than those that died in Katrina. And he can do that because in 2017, the online right becomes much more organized. So you have conservative publications, conservative Twitter accounts, YouTubers claiming that the death toll numbers are faked. From NBC at the time, they write another Breitbart article from August 20th titled "Left-Wing Latinos to Use Hurricane Maria Tragedy as Anti-Trump Midterm Message" claimed that the, quote, leftist Latino advocacy groups were planning to use the federal government's disaster response for, quote, an anti-Trump campaign. And that is, I think, that solidifies the playbook, the one that we're still seeing.
Well, this gets back into like the looter / food finder dichotomy here and how that plays out, because like it happened to Puerto Rico. That's Puerto Ricans who are suffering. Like, they're not even American. They're foreigners.
Yeah.
They speak Spanish. Even though Puerto Rico,
I know what you're saying.
I'm making a joke here, but like the horrible floods that happened last year in like North Carolina, the whole valleys got washed away, and that was mostly like rural white people suffering from it. Then you get all the stuff about how like the government's doing it to them, like look how unjust this is. Where's the federal government? And it's just like, well, I mean, in the same situation, like you can point to like an inadequate response by the federal government to a natural disaster, but like once it becomes times like who is suffering, like whose homes are being washed away here? And if they're Puerto Rican or they're not white, well, then they're lying about it. They're whining. They're complaining. This is fake. The death toll is exaggerated. But then when it's your people doing it, you're like, look at this. Look at these people. They've lost everything. Look how unjust this is. Where is our government? Like, how could they do this to us?
Which they can never admit that it's the government they voted. Like, I think that there's a cognitive dissonance here that a lot of the right wing is trying to constantly deal with, which is a natural disaster like Hurricane Sandy happens under Obama. It's pretty good. People remember it as actually, as you said, a moment of solidarity. The trains are up and running. Way less few people die. Natural disaster happens under Trump. Several happen under Trump, and it's a nightmare. And so you have to explain that. And I think there is like a psychic damage that like conservatives take where they can't face the fact that like they voted for this level of response.
Well, I mean, like that gets into the other like meta conspiracy, like QAnon.
I'm so glad you brought this up because that's where we're headed next.
Right. QAnon emerged right at the beginning of the first Trump administration. And it was like at the moment of their like unprecedented victory in, they're an unprecedented political victory, like upended like all political conventional wisdom, every poll, they won. They're in charge of the federal government. And then I just think it's interesting that like that is the moment when this like grand meta conspiracy begins to gel that like seems to like more than anything function as a narrative that explains why all of the bad people are still doing bad things and your life still sucks, and it's like there's been no improvement in the conditions of your life. And then also all of the evil people that are fucking like eating and raping children, you still see them walking around Martha's Vineyard on TV being interviewed, and it's just like, wait, I thought we had all the evidence. Why aren't these people being arrested? And they're like, aha, but they are, and what you're seeing are clones. But like, even if you don't believe like that element of it, it's this whole idea of like there's like the deep state and there's like the white hats and the black hats, and there's this like invisible war going on, and like who's in charge of the federal government doesn't really matter because like the bad people are still there preventing Donald Trump from doing all the good things that you think of when like you're like, yeah, that's my president.
I'm glad you brought up QAnon because that is, I think, the biggest change between how right-wing conspiracists dealt with something like Katrina versus how they deal with natural disasters now. Because by 2018, not only is QAnon thriving, but QAnon influenced politicians are winning positions of power. And so when the California wildfires break out in 2018, it is completely mismanaged. It's the worst wildfire in California history to that point. Trump withholds relief funds. It's a total disaster. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is absolutely cooked in QAnon radiation, do you remember what she said about the wildfires in 2018?
I do not. Was this the space lasers comment?
Jewish space lasers. That's right. Yep. In November, posts on Facebook, obviously, of course, that she's just asking questions about space layers. She doesn't say the Jewish part, but she singles out the involvement of Rothschild Incorporated with a company making solar power generators. The media writes at the time, one theory which has been promoted by QAnon followers falsely posits that a nefarious entity used laser beams or a similar instrument to start the fire for financial profit. And then she writes, because there are too many coincidences to ignore regarding the fire, including then California Governor Jerry Brown, who wanted to build the high-speed rail project, and, quote, oddly, there are these people who have said they saw what looked like lasers or blue beams of light causing the fires. And then she speculates that the vice chairman of Rothschild Incorporated, international investment banking firm, was somehow involved by beaming the sun's energy back to Earth. Which could start a fire.
That's interesting because the sun already does that.
It does do that by definition. Like, yeah, that's what we use it for. That's what we like it about it.
Like think about this, like natural disasters, and I just think about like how throughout so much of human history and religion, like natural disasters are so deeply ingrained in our mythology, like in the stories we tell ourselves. Like so many religions have like a flood narrative, like, you know, obviously like in our tradition, there's Noah's Ark, right? That like God, like basically like what wiped out the earth and like was like, start over. Noah, you and your family and all the animals, where a flood is wiping it clean. Like they've always kind of stood in as like a representation of everything that human beings can't control. Even with our, extraordinary cooperation, our large brains, our technical mastery of our physical environment, our like interventions in the natural world in terms of like agriculture and infrastructure and things like that, still like all it takes is one big storm to just lay waste to all of that. And it's always stood as kind of like a testament to remind humanity to be humble in the face of the natural world, or i.e. God, right? Like God can just flood the planet, and like he's done it before, he'll do it again. And what's interesting to me about these contemporary conspiracy narratives around the weather and natural disasters that you're talking about is that like in place of God's judgment or man's need for humility in the face of God, we have sort of kind of replaced that with technology and the government as like as a stand-in for what would otherwise be like a wrathful or judgmental God, and that we need to like appeal to this God, government, or the people in charge of the weather machine, either to, I don't know, smite us or save us, or that it's like an evil God that's doing to us, or that man has usurped the power of God and is now using it for himself.
No, I think you're right. Where a thing that honestly, Grant, you and I should talk about doing an episode on, which is like, within the secularization of right-wing politics in America, we have not really changed the shape of them. We have just replaced, like they have replaced the evangelical God with other institutions, with other Trump. Ideas.
With Donald Trump. Yeah, like that is a fascinating thing to me. Because we're talking again about the Charlie Kirk assassination, like the sacralizing of like political figures. They have just replaced God or Jesus Christ or any sense of Christianity with Donald Trump himself and the figures surrounding him. And you see that in the attempt to like kind of make Charlie Kirk into a Christian martyr or saint.
Well, I think you and I are similar here, where we both still have a soft spot for the total off the rails wackadoo conspiracy theorists, because like growing up, like they were not really part of the larger umbrella of republicanism. The evangelicals didn't like them. The Alex Joneses of the world were in the basement with the ham radio. It was not like that. But you watch the conservative politics of America over the last 30 years, those guys have become louder and louder and more influential as the parties become more secular. And I think that's not an accident. It's effectively creating the superstructure that allows them to replace God in the evangelicalism with Trump. It's to create a belief system, and they need them. You need a guy to say, actually, there's a laser pointed at California, run by the Rothschilds or whatever, because that is, magical thinking that could replace the biblical flood and explain it even better, perhaps, for the purposes of the modern Republican Party.
Yeah, and like at the end of the day, like the myth is the same, like that civilization is our culture and our civilization is fallen, evil, and corrupt, and that like needs to be sort of purged, wiped away, and like renewed through disaster or like the deaths of millions, in some sort of apocalypse to create like a new perfect God-centered society.
And we're going to be talking about that apocalypse, which happened in 2020, right after the break. But first, an ad from our sponsors, Rothschilds Incorporated. So all of this stuff basically permanently becomes a part of the American psyche after 2020. We're not going to be talking about COVID in this episode, which I do include as an example of climate change, but it is such a massive hyper object that like we just don't have the space for it. But as COVID is happening in 2020, we do get more wildfires, this time in Oregon. Imagining a better world for a second, this seems like it could have been a good wake-up call to take climate change seriously. But instead, the playbook to distract from the existential threat and government failure worked like a charm. Instead of, blaming Jewish space lasers in 2020, they just blame Antifa. Conspiracies are floating around right-wing media, and who else but Joe Rogan could make the claim as mainstream as possible? This is what Media Matters wrote at the time. On the September 17th edition of the Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan repeatedly and falsely said that they've arrested left-wing people for lighting these forest fires in Portland, Oregon. He added that there was a madness going on there and claimed that these people want your head and they want blood, and they don't seem to be willing to settle for anything less. They really fixate on this stuff, and it becomes I think the go-to reaction for climate disasters post-2020 is now it is the left who did it somehow and we'll figure it out, rather than obviously what is reality, which is that we're just not prepared for anything like this at a federal level. My question is, from your perspective, at this point they are running our institutions and they are crumbling, and climate change is obviously making it worse, and they have to constantly run cover, but I don't get the sense that QAnon is as popular as it once was. So like, what has replaced QAnon at this point from what you've seen?
That's a good question. I think there's probably less of a need for a QAnon because the character of the second Trump administration is different than the first. Like, I think like in the first administration, he was still constrained by the people he appointed in his administration, guys like Steve Mnuchin or whoever he had running the Pentagon, people who like still at the end of the day were smart enough to know that he was a bad guy and an idiot, and that the country essentially still needed to be managed by people who knew what they were knew anything.
Right.
Anyone in the government who knows anything about their field of management or like area in which they work is essentially an existential threat to their ideological mission, and they have been like 100%. empowered to pursue that, and they have been, and I guess we'll be living with the results of that for quite some time. So I don't know what's going to replace QAnon. I just think it's like an ever stronger cult of personality around Donald Trump as the leader, and any frustrations with like a lack of success, in terms of like the economy, jobs, people's daily lives, how clean safe their communities are, how safe and dignified they feel in their own lives. It doesn't seem like anything is going to happen to comfort or provide any kind of dignity or security for people in the coming years. And I think that's why like there's ever more of a need to find, isolate, and eliminate enemies. Like the enemies inside the United States of America. Like it used to be like it's the deep state, and like Donald Trump is fighting them into the first Trump term, and like we're fighting them, we need your help, but like there are still so many bad actors like deeply embedded in the government and the media that are holding back the truth and are holding back this great renewal of America and its promise. In Trump 2, it's like No, we've gotten rid of all those people, but like there are still people in this country, just civilians, just people living, being born in this country or visiting the country, that they're the fucking enemy. They're the problem. They're what's stopping this great national renewal, this great purification of the country.
The easiest way to comfort people right now is to send death threats to your local meteorologist, which is exactly what people have been doing for the better part of 9 months.
Oh man, we covered that story. that story
can you talk a little bit about it? Because this is something that it just keeps happening.
Oh, this is like the guy who broke into he just basically took some bolt cutters and like cut through like a chain link fence that was like protecting just like a local TV station's like weather antenna, and he just smashed like the circuit box for it and was like, they were like, this is us, we did it. They're like WKCRS Kansas City is controlling the weather.
Yeah, and it's happening like all over the country, and it has been since Trump's campaign last year. And what we're seeing is a lot of the people who have spent, the first Trump administration getting on board with the conspiracy theories, understanding the power, you get from wielding them, and using them to impact politics. And there's been enough conspiracy theories eroding our norms that we now just completely shrug off the possibility of FEMA having a competent response. For example, in the face of another devastating fire in January of 2025, the new establishment just blamed the fires on DEI firemen. And so all the conversations about what is happening to our planet, what a good government response should be, it's all totally skipped over, because these guys just dangle bait for the culture war. And January 9th of this year, Elon Musk retweets a post that says, DEI means people die. Megyn Kelly does a whole video with over 200,000 views.
As if all of this is not enough, it turns out that in recent years, LA's fire chief has made not filling the fire hydrants top priority, but diversity. Diversity is at least among the top priorities for the department.
And Don Jr. on Truth Social writes, can we rename DEI to DIE? They really thought they were cooking with this, since that's what seems to happen to the people downstream of those who place woke virtue signaling far above competency. And then when Trump enters office in January, he floats the idea of eliminating FEMA in January. In the spring, 200 FEMA employees are fired by DOGE cuts, and they're told to get rid of anything about climate change or DEI from official literature. 2 months later, over 1,000 employees, 20% of the staff, are fired again. In May, hurricane season starts, and FEMA basically says like they have no preparations for it. And then on May 7th, Cameron Hamilton, the acting FEMA head, testifies saying it's insufficient but would be bad to eliminate it. Hoping to keep his job. He's then fired the next day. His replacement is a DHS guy with zero emergency experience, and in his first meeting with staff, he says, don't get in my way, I'll run right over you. And then in June, Trump says he wants to eliminate FEMA again, but he's going to wait till after hurricane season. And he's given Pete Hegsworth the purview to get rid of them. And where we are most recently is there's an open letter that was signed by FEMA employees called the FEMA Katrina Declaration, and 20 of the 35 public signers were put on leave. So we effectively have no disaster relief anymore, and the majority of the Republican Party are either pretending to believe in anti-climate change conspiracy theories or just genuinely do believe them. So yeah, that's where we're at right now.
I've been thinking about this in like along the lines of Robert F. Kennedy.
Sure.
And like his tenure at Health and Human Services, like the Make America Healthy Again agenda. And you can add the CDC as like another organ of like disaster response and management that is like, being eviscerated right now. And like the person that they appointed to run the CDC, she served 30 days and then they fired her because apparently she was actually trying to do her job.
Right.
And they weren't going to let her get away with that. It's like the idea that like, oh, it's the pharmaceutical companies and like it's the food we're being poisoned, and it's the vaccines, it's the medicine, and if you just maintain a healthy lifestyle and like eat the right foods and follow the right health fads and like purchase the right supplements from your favorite media figures, then like your immune system will be fine. Like there's no reason for you to ever get sick, but it's just like it's your environment, it's what you eat, it's the products that you buy when you should be buying other products. But what I mean is, like, I think this is all part and parcel of an attempt to, like, at the very moment which, as we've been talking about, like, the last just threads that are keeping any kind of, like, social welfare in this country or public health or, like, anything that the government does for you or, like, to help you is being eviscerated. Like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, you can bet that's next. Along with it, the CDC, the FEMA, and, like, the response to, you know, plagues, disasters, things like that. All of this is to say, it's very clear that the attitude that they're trying to, like, inculcate in the American people is that you are on your own.
Yes.
I think people already sense that. They already, like, and that's why I don't think, like, it's so hard to sell something like something better, because it involves telling people that, like, oh, like, the government can, like, take an act. The government and the economy should be about the quality of your life. That, like, that you are the economy, you are the government, and it should work for you, and that, like, the incredible wealth of our society should be managed in a democratic way to, like, make your life easier, to give you healthcare, education, housing.
Sounds like socialism
like
to me.
And it's just like, why would anyone? Yeah, well, why would anyone? But, you know, why would anyone believe that? Why would anyone believe that the government can or wants to do any of these things if you've been alive any time in the past 40 years of this country's history, or even further back than that? Like, the New Deal, like, you know, I was born in 1983. Like, the New Deal consensus was, like, already coming apart. Like, we were firmly in the neoliberal era, and now it's coming to its savage denouement. And I think, like, whether it is diseases, like universal human experiences, like disease, death, ailments, aging, these things that horrify and plague humanity, but are essentially the most shared human experience imaginable, that, like, nothing can be done for you about that except what you do personally. And I think it is about, like, whether it is having your house washed away by a hurricane, or having your house be unable to be insured because of where it was built, or whatever next disease is going to, whatever novel pandemic is going to come mutating across our mucous membranes sometime in the future. I think the answer, like, what they're trying to create is a situation where everybody is on their own, and therefore the responsibility for your welfare is entirely yours. But we're not totally just throwing you to the wolves, because we're giving you the right information about the things you should buy. And so that, like, your survival and that your quality of life essentially becomes a matter of personal choice and judgment in the consumer decisions that you make. And that there is no collective responsibility whatsoever on behalf of the government or even yourself to anyone else.
It's funny you bring up, like, the products you buy, because I remember there was a flood in the American South. I want to say it was maybe Texas or something in the last couple of years. And the local news had an entire segment on a product this guy bought to seal his house. And so his neighbors were, like, in kayaks, like, going up the street by boat. And he was like, I'm safe because I bought this sealant for my house. It was like an inflatable, like, thing you put around your house and then you seal the doors and windows. And he's like, I'm going to be fine. And he was fine. But the local news, which obviously, like, some fucking Sinclair broadcaster, was like, see, you can just put your house in a fucking inflatable, like an inflatable inner tube, and it'll be totally fine from floods. And I want to summarize kind of the story that we've been trying to tell today and get your thoughts on it, because I want to make it really clear for our listeners. So basically, there were kooks and crazies, you know, all throughout the 80s and 90s who were at least on some level noticing climate change, and they were telling all kinds of conspiracies about it, and they were fringe. You know, people weren't really paying attention. But as the Republicans, especially post-Obama, become more obsessed with maintaining power and deregulating the state, they start to bring them further into their fold and use those conspiracies to explain to people exactly what you're talking about, which is these things that are the direct result of us deregulating, you know, the federal government, the social safety net, and enriching ourselves. Well, actually, no, they're not our fault. They're Jewish space lasers, or they're, Obama, or they're, whatever it is. It's trans leftist activists burning, forests in Portland. And it allows for them to continue deregulating.
They did the thing with the magnifying glass on some dry leaves.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so you believe that, and we'll continue enriching ourselves and continue deregulating the social safety net and destroying it and dismantling it. And if you get in trouble, if your house washes away, if you get a measles outbreak in your school that kills your kid, if you get COVID, if you fall into the fucking mega quake that eventually separates California from America, well, that's because you didn't buy the right product. And those products are actually being sold by our friends in, at this company or that company. And that is what we're seeing. It is the people at the very top of our government weaponizing conspiracy theories, using them to groom future politicians of America, all as cover for you are on your own, good luck, and if you get mad at us, actually here's some insane thing I found on YouTube that somebody made up that you can believe that and not get mad at us instead. That is what I think has really happened in America over the last 30 years or so.
It's like what you were seeing now is the fruits of a totally market dominated society. Well, it is like God in a way, that man should not question God. It's like the Old Testament. Like, who are you? Like, who the fuck are you? You're just Job. I created the universe. And that is essentially how the market functions in the ideology that governs this country, and you see that in the fabric of American life. And what I mean by that is that, of course, to markets, human life are increasingly inconsequential, and that larger and larger swaths of humanity, and indeed of our fellow citizens in this country, are essentially irrelevant to the market and capital.
I think literally as of this week, a report came out that over 50%, if not more, of all spending in the market is by the top 20%, top 10.
Oh, the top 10%.
Yeah.
So the consumer spending, is the consumer spending spent by 10% of the people in this country? So what does that say about the other 90%?
What are they buying? What are they buying?
We'll always need people to essentially do the jobs that keep the functioning of the economy continuing, right? But as we see now with AI, these people could not be more thrilled at the prospect of rendering more and more of human life just irrelevant, or human labor irrelevant. Because why would you pay someone to do something if you didn't have to? Matt said this on our show a long time ago about the rise of fascism in this country, and I think in a market-dominated society where human life is increasingly cheap, if not worthless, you're going to need ways, and you're going to need stories to tell people, and you're going to need a kind of moral architecture in place to convince the people that are within the walls of the gated community that it's just essentially okay what happens to people who aren't them, and that it's not your responsibility, and in fact their existence is a threat to you and your little gated community. And that is, I think, in short, the sum total of this ideology, and where the culture and civil American life is going.
And I think to sort of bring it back around to technology, and we've been talking about the evolution of these narratives online, but the current technological landscape helps this to a huge degree by adding to the voyeurism of it. And there's a tweet that I whenever I talk about climate change in any capacity, I always try to figure out a way to bring it up, because I just think it's really important that everyone on Earth hears it, reads it.
I know what you're already going to say. I think about this all the time too.
You could also just take the word climate change out and kind of put in anything you want here at this point. But climate change will manifest as a series of disasters viewed through phones with footage that gets closer and closer to where you live until you're the one filming it. And I do think that when we talk about conspiracy theories, we talk about internet discourse around something like climate change, there is this not helplessness, not powerlessness, but almost sort of a passivity to watching it through feeds and sort of abstracting it until you are the one at the mass shooting filming it, until you are the one at the climate change incident filming it, until you're the one, being shot at by the Jewish space laser. There is a feeling that you are just going to see this stuff online and that it exists online, but it is very real. And when you talk about the end of the neoliberal project, to me, that is very much the idea that you are helpless. You are not active. You are not an active participant in reality.
You're an individual node in the economy.
Yes, exactly.
Human civilization is invented to share the burdens of things like natural disasters, because like by ourselves we are totally naked in the face of like I said, like the everyday and spectacular catastrophes that are a fabric of of nature, of reality, of human life, and that like whether it be disease or floods or things like that, that like the project of human civilization, like there are shared lives on this planet organized into nation states, towns, cities, whatever, like hopefully getting to like a broader, larger human species, is that like it is only through collective and cooperative, coordinated effort and planning that like we are able to like not worry so much about these things as we used to, or like feel safe from them because of like the efforts that have been taken collectively to mitigate these effects, or to like vaccinate ourselves against diseases. Yeah. And I think we're just experiencing the breakdown of the idea that like the country, the nation, that human life in general is anything other than like an individual video game in which you have one life and no saves.
I 100% agree.
I want your perspective on this. When I was putting together this timeline, my kind of assumption was that we would see the title in my head was like, what do we talk about when we should be talking about climate change? And I thought we would see more efforts to distract us sooner. But what this timeline showed us was that it was like only after normally Republican incompetence in response to a natural disaster did then they kind of pivot to making it about race or like a divisive issue to stop us from talking about their failure to handle the situation. But it wasn't until 2018, 2020 with the forest fires that we started to just go like, you know what, we're going to fucking skip trying to like handle this efficiently, and we're just going to instead immediately point to Antifa or whoever the boogeyman is at the moment, and that's only accelerated.
Yeah.
Does it surprise you that this was an advent of like dangle keys so late in this process, or does that make sense to you?
Well, it's because Obama made everything political, Grant.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for asking such a stupid question. Obviously. How dare he wear a tan suit?
Republicans used to like kind of like pretend. I mean, like I know it was always a politicized issue, but like they had to kind of pretend that like, oh, like we care about climate change too, and like like but maybe it won't be so bad. But like now, I think they've made it official that like not only are we like going to like stop doing anything, even symbolically to cut carbon or anything like that. We're just gonna like it's all made up. It's a hoax, and like any bad thing that you see happening, well, it's not our fault, and here's who it is. Here's whose fault it is.
DEI firemen, right? It's DEI firemen. It's always been DEI firemen.
Yeah, trans people.
I also just think like around 2017, 2018, a lot of people at the center of Trumpism were like, we're gonna go for a permanent government, and so they don't have to pretend anymore.
Yeah. I think that's what they're expecting. I think I think a lot of the frustration that you see on the right is coming from the fact that like, okay, like they've won, like Trump is president again. Like he did the impossible thing twice. And like, obviously like that is evidence of like the total failure of liberalism. But I think they mistake that failure for like the defeat of liberalism. And I think that they still can't really force most of the people in this country to like have the same basic values and programming that like they still feel embarrassed or they still feel judged to say most of the things that they believe publicly, because most people are weirded out by it, or if not actively repelled. And I think that they've mistaken political success for like the final cultural victory that they're always like just so desperately grasping.
So you're saying things are going to be fine. Thank you. What a great way to end it.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Everything's going to be fine. They're going to learn their lessons.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I know this episode has been very dense. It's been very heavy. So I wanted to end with a final question just to lighten things up, which is, what's your favorite thing about climate change?
My favorite thing about climate change, I think it's probably like all the new animal species that are like invasive animal species. That,
cool. Like lanternflies and stuff?
Yeah. Oh, I see lanternflies every day out here, and I do my part to kill them. I wage the war on these bugs, but like pythons consuming Florida.
Sure.
Like hopefully we'll get some like charismatic megafauna in the Northeast sometime in my life.
It does. My favorite thing is that it does feel like we've settled into a moment where like it's almost permanently fall in New York, except for like 2 months on either side that are so extreme you can't go outside.
Yeah.
And so like I love jackets and sweaters. So for me right now, I'm okay with the New York weather. I'm
not so sure about that. I mean, I think fall is going away too. I think there's just going to be summer and winter in the future.
And then
increasingly just summer.
It's going to be 6 months. We'll have 1 week on either side of the year where we can go outside.
You don't want to know my favorite thing about climate change?
What's your favorite thing about climate change, Grant?
I like that every like 7 months we get a new huckster who has some idea that's obviously a grift, but they can say that it's going to help climate change through like first step steal underpants, second step profit kind of logic.
So what's an example?
We're going to bring back the woolly mammoth. That was used where like woolly mammoths are going to stomp down roots or something that is going to like there's just like whatever, like I mean we see it all the time with AI. They're like sure, it's killing everything right now, but if it gets super enough, it will solve it for us without us having to do anything. It's become the elixir of like, we just got to invent the crazy thing, and then the crazy thing will somehow solve climate change. I appreciate the chutzpah of the laziness of it.
Yeah, and independent of how it will affect climate change or whatnot, I think we should bring back woolly mammoths.
If I'm going to get stomped out by something huge, like be it a wave, fire, or woolly mammoth, I would prefer woolly mammoth.
I agree. Yeah, I want big elephants. I want to thank you for coming on the show. I usually ask our guests where can they follow you. I assume everyone knows where to check out your stuff, but do you have anything else you want to plug? Where should I send people?
Let's see. We got Movie Mindset coming back in October for some horror movies coming up. Buy our comic book, Year Zero, badegg.co.
Thank you again. Oh yeah, and before you log off, why not help us out? Panic Roll was nominated for 2 Signal Awards for the category Weird and the category Conversation Starter. If you want to support us, just head to vote.signalaward.com. and make sure to vote for Panic World in both Weird and Conversation Starter categories. It only takes a second. It would help support the show. It also means I get a free dinner if we win, I think. I think I get to go to the award show, and that would be really nice. I need an excuse to leave the house. So please, head on over to vote.signalaward.com.
Personally, I think we should be up for like most important show ever created, but
that's too much pressure. I would much rather sneak in with a nice little award and then get a free dinner. That's really what I'm about, because I'm 35 years old. And so for me, that's really the focus of most of my life at this point is there free dinner.
Not me. I'm going to need somebody at Signal to look me in the eye and tell me what is weird about our show that talks about gooning.
I think it would be easier to say what's not weird about the show.